So in this video, I'm going to do a short case study showing how I'm going to migrate a project from JUnit 4 to JUnit 5. Now the project I'm going to migrate is a set of random data examples on GitHub. So github.com/evotester/random data examples. The reason I'm doing this is JUnit 4 has been around for a long time. It's very stable. I quite like it. But everyone wants to use JUnit 5 now because that's up to date. In JUnit 5, there are, in the documentation, some information on migrating. So that's good. We'll use that. There are lots of blogs that you can look at to give you more information on migrating. But they don't give you a lot of migration strategies. And that's what we're going to look at here. So it's got migration tips. It explains some of the differences. I'm going to have a look at some of this in the code. The differences, a lot of it are assertions. And we can change the assertions pretty much with find and replace. We can do a find replace right at the code base because these are one-to-one mappings. What we have some issues with are the assertions that are in JUnit. So let's have a quick look at the project. Now I've already started this migration. I started this project with JUnit 4. So you can see that throughout it we've got test and assert coming in from JUnit 4. So this is the kind of thing that I'm going to have to migrate. But I've already converted the project to use JUnit 5. So how have I done that? So I've taken out the JUnit 4 dependency. This is the JUnit 4 dependency that I had in the project. Now to move to JUnit 5, I've had to bring in the JUnit Jupyter API. That gives me most of JUnit. But I also want the parameterization part of JUnit because that's why I'm migrating this project to JUnit 5. I want to use their parameterization functionality, which is a little bit easier than bringing in an external library for JUnit 4 and makes me more up to date. Now, if I bring in JUnit 5 the JUnit vintage engine, I immediately get backwards compatibility with a lot of JUnit 4. I might also have to bring in the JUnit migration support if I'm using JUnit rules. I'm not using JUnit rules in this project. If I was, I'd have to do a bit more migration. So as soon as you get rid of JUnit 4 and bring in these libraries, you will immediately see in your code base if there's any high priority things that you have to change, right? Because you'll do a Maven test. If anything fails, you have to fix it. At this point, we can now migrate slowly to JUnit 5. So let's have a quick look at an example here. So here is an example. This is using, let me get rid of this. This is using JUnit 4 completely, even though I'm running with JUnit 5. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is the assertions, right? The @test thing is backwardsly compatible. So when I switch to JUnit 5, I won't have a problem with @test. I'll just import it from a different place. And imports, I can find and replace to change the values to move them into JUnit 5. The issue I'm going to have is with assertions. So I would have less of an issue if I was doing static imports. So let me do a static import here. Let's bring that in from the, in fact, let me force a static import here. If I was doing import static org dot JUnit dot assert not null, I would have less of an issue because I can just change this to be the assertions. Where's this? So if I import the assertions, get rid of this, make this a static. So I could just change the imports if I was originally statically importing my asserts. Right? I could just change them from different paths. But I'm not doing that. That's not how I tend to code. I tend to like the put an assert in front because then I get the code completion and I don't clutter up my imports. So I need to take a different approach here. I also have the issue with the assertions. So here if I do assertions assert not null, bring in this as a top level thing there. I've got an assert not null. This is my message. This is the value that I'm asserting. in JUnit 5, the messages go at the end. So this assert not null has actually changed. What I'm asserting not null on here is this. This is the actual thing that I'm asserting on. I'm asserting that this string is null, and this is the message that's reported if there's an error. I don't want that. So anytime I'm using the assertions that have got a message in it, I need to do Control, Command, or Alt, Command, Shift, and right there to move the messages. But that seems a lot of work. So on Windows, that would be Alt, Control, Shift, and then the arrow key. On Mac, that's Alt, Command, Shift, and arrow key, and I'm moving the parameters around. That's in IntelliJ to support things. But that seems like quite a lot of work to try and do that individually for every single assertion. So I'm not going to do that. So let me get this back to normal. What I'm tempted to do is, because the assertions have changed so much in JUnit 5 to JUnit 4, I'm tempted to start experimenting with other assertion libraries as well, rather than rely purely on it. So to support me migrating to JUnit 5 and experimenting with different assertion libraries, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a branch by abstraction, which means that a lot of my code is going to remain the same. I've done the imports, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating an abstraction layer that helps me do the branching across to it. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to get rid of the assert import here. So now this assert isn't coming anywhere. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class that represents the assertion, and it's only going to have to cover the assertions that I use. I don't have to mimic the entire assertion class from JUnit 4 unless I'm using all the assertions, which seems unlikely. And this is a small project, so I'm just going to mimic that. So if I do Alt Enter to create a new class, I'm going to create a class called assert. But I'm going to create something called dev dot, I'll call it JUnit migration package, and I'll go so to JUnit 5, because I'm tempted to go to AssertJ, to Hamcrest. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to start with a to JUnit 5 and create an abstraction layer for that. So I'll do OK. So now we've got a new class. And then I can see which methods I have to do. So I'm going to add in the assert not null, create assert not null. And all I'm going to do here is delegate off to the JUnit 5. Assertions dot assert not null. And if I repeat this process for all the methods in here, eventually I'll have an abstraction layer in here that mirrors the code base. So let's create this one. Assert not null, create method. So this is the message, and this is the actual. And then I'll delegate off to the JUnit 5 assertions. Assertions dot assert not null, and then I want the actual, and then message. And to make this a bit more general, I'm going to have this as a string. I'm going to have this as an object, because then it'll map on to pretty much any of the appropriate methods there. Oops. String, message, and then object. Now in my code, most of this is strings anyway. Assert true. Let's create this method. I'm just going to keep going through the code for doing this. Assertions dot assert true b assert equals. So that's the expected. Oops. So it's an assert equals. And what we round does assert equals go in here, so it's expected actual. Now if my typing was better, this would not be as long. So even though I'm doing objects here, I'm tempted because of the code base that I'm working with just to stick all these back to strings, because that's mainly what I'm doing. Again, the migration is going to be specific for each code base that you've got. So I'm going to make it as specific. I'm not going to try and make it generic. I was thinking about making it generic for this video. I'm just going to make it actual that I need. So now, what have I got here? I've got a class that I haven't had to change the code in the class. So I've created an abstraction. So I've created a branch by abstraction. My code itself doesn't have to change very much. All I've changed is this package structure. So now my assertions are actually using JUnit 5 here in this class. So the benefit of that is I can go back to the pom.xml and see how much more I have to change. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to comment out the JUnit vintage. If I build this, I'll see where all the errors are in the code. Right, so I can see that in my tests I'm using a before. I didn't expect that, so that's good. So I can do a find and replace on that. I've got the assertions and I've got the test. So again, the assertions, I've already done an assert true. So let me alt import class. Which one did that import? It imported the 2JUnit 5 assert. So I've converted that. Let me get rid of this. So the before and test, I'm still going to rely on the JUnit 5 at the moment because I'm concentrating on assertions. So let me get rid of all the assertions first. So again, we've got assertion issues here. If I do alt import class, it's brought in the JUnit 5 migration, and I've already converted a lot of the assertions there. So let's have a look. In here. So now I'm just working through and seeing which assertions I haven't done yet. Because my reason for doing this is I had a quick look at AssertJ, and I quite like the fluent interface that AssertJ gives you. But my high priority is how can I migrate to JUnit 5. Import class. Right, so now I can see that I need a message for assert true. So let's bring that in. Because you can see that what I started doing was I actually started migrating. I started migrating on a method by method, and this was just taking ages. So let me bring this back to the JUnit 4 approach. So then when I fix one of these, create method, string message. So I want assertions, assert true, be message. Let's get rid of that. So that's those assertions fixed. So I think now, if I look through my code, because this is a very small project, so this is happening fast. I think now what I've got is mainly at tests. At tests. So let's start changing the at tests. Let's bring those into JUnit 5. Import class. There we go. So what I'm going to do now, having done that import, let's do a find and replace throughout the code. So I want to find this. Oops. And I want to replace it with that. So there's only 6 matches and 6 files because I only have 6. If I do the replace all, yes, let's get rid of that assert. The test. So now I've just got the before to handle. So let's have a look at the migration tips. The at before and class used instead before each. So I need an at before each in here instead of an at before. And where was that? Must be in here. Oh, so we've got an assert. Let's fix that. Didn't notice that one. Create method. String message. I'll just call that bool b. Assertions dot assert. Just type it, it'll be faster. Assert false and b message. Now where have I still got issues? Let's use the build to find it. I'm just trying to use the tools as much as possible to help me because I don't really want to do work. So has that worked? Oh, so I had an at before in there that I wasn't using. So I didn't actually need to convert it into a before after. So in theory then, I have migrated this project. Let me run everything. Let's see if that works. So that's all my tests working. Let's go into the pom.xml. Close everything down so I don't get clutter. So let's see. So we've got rid of the JUnit vintage. We're not using JUnit 4.11. We've just got the Jupyter API and the params. So I have effectively migrated this project using this assertion there. Now, what I can do now, if I want to, let me just quickly, I'm just going to quickly check this in. So migrate to JUnit 5 with assertion abstraction there. Okay, so now I'm at the point where if I'm happy with the JUnit 5 assertions, what I can do is I can just go into the, let's have a look, can I do it from here? Refactor, I should be able to refactor inline and all and remove the method. So let me try that. I'm going to do that for all the things that are in here. If I just do refactor, right, that method has gone. Let me get something up before I do the next one. If I do a find usages, so here's the test that is using that assert not null. I'm going to do refactor inline all and remove the method refactor. You can see here that this test is now using the assertions library and it's actually brought in the assertions. So I'm migrating my tests over to the JUnit 5 assertions without actually changing any of the code, without having to change the lines internally, because that's, I've branched by abstraction. Now I'm happy with what I've done, so I'm getting rid of the abstraction automatically. Inline all and remove the method, refactor. Inline all and remove the method. 25 of those. So I'm using the automated refactoring. Hopefully this will all work. Hopefully this will all work. Inline refactor. Now I'm just doing the remove the method just to demonstrate that this is gone. Chances are I probably wouldn't do an inline all and remove the method because I've got other projects that I want to refactor and I code the same way. So if I hadn't removed the methods here, I would have a class that I could copy into those other projects and start building it up, and it will represent my classes and support my migration for other projects. But let's see what's happened here. So that everything here now is using assertions. We're not using my abstraction, and we've converted this over to JUnit 5 abstraction. This is a pure JUnit 5 test now. So let's see if everything works. Okay, so that worked. And now I have a JUnit 5 converted project. And the way it worked is I did a branch by abstraction to get the assertions, because it was the assertions in this project that were really going to give me pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to revert back to where we were. So now we're back to the assertions library. The benefit I have now is I have a very small set of assertions. What I could do is I could migrate to AssertJ. Let's try that. I haven't used AssertJ, so let's have a quick try at doing the migration to AssertJ. So AssertJ, fluid assertions, AssertJ. How do I bring this in? Get quick start. So I need to bring in the dependency. Downloading it. Okay. So in here, in theory, what I should be doing is I should be creating a new class, but to help me experiment, what I'm first of all going to do is I'm going to figure out how do I do an AssertJ. Now everything seems to start with assert that, then I assert actual. So let's bring in the AssertJ. There we go, assertions for class type. Assertions AssertJ, let's bring that in. So assert that actual, which is a boolean, dot assert is not null, is not null, is not null. So if I did this throughout, let me get rid of that, I can start migrating across to JUnit to AssertJ. And I'm just doing that inline at the moment just to make it easy. So let's do the not. So this is a is not null, and this is an is not null with a message. So assert that actual that is not null. Picked up, and it's overriding error message with message. So this gives me the ability to compare the assertion approaches and see which one I like best. B is true. There we go. Now I quite like this fluent interface in AssertJ. Hamcrest, so this has given me more code completion than Hamcrest. Hamcrest, I'll do assert that thing, and then I have to know what condition I'm putting in, and there's not a lot of code help or completion to do that. But with AssertJ, I've got this. So AssertJ looks really good for beginners, and given a lot of time I'm training beginners and a lot of time I'm switching between languages, I quite like fluent interfaces like that. So let's do assert that actual dot is equal to expected. Now I'm doing it in line. I will fix this in a minute, but I'm doing it step by step. Again, it's a branch by abstraction approach. I could have done, I mean, this isn't really branch by abstraction because I'm making changes that could break. So we haven't tested anything. Let's run the test and see if everything works. I'm going to do that in here for the moment. So we've got a mix of JUnit 5 assertions and AssertJ assertions. But currently, everything is still working. So that's good. Assert that B dot is true. where we're overriding error message. Assert that b dot is false. There we go. So let's run everything. All right, so because we've got this assertion layer, we've got this abstraction layer, I'm going to create a new package here, new package. I'll call it to AssertJ. I'm going to create a new class in here called assert. So I'm going to do a copy and paste refactoring. It's not really a copy and paste refactor. Let's do this. Assert that from assertions. There we go. Get rid of all the comments here. So this is a purely AssertJ migration abstraction. And this one will be purely a JUnit 5 abstraction. Now, because I'm doing copy and paste and I'm deleting, there's a chance of making mistakes. There are shortcut keys for deleting lines and commenting out things, but I'm not doing that. So this isn't necessarily the best example, but I'm doing it fast. So now what we have is a class here for abstracting JUnit 5. And here I have a class that abstracts to AssertJ. I can see that this one is used in some places but not others. We've got a mix. So what I really want to do is change everything in here to be using the assertion from AssertJ. So if I could do a find replace, I could simply do finding path. Oops, I want to do a replace in path. So rather than using to JUnit 5, I'm going to say to AssertJ. Replace all. And it should just work. So if I go to the assert, none of these are used. Oh, that one is used. That one is used. Where is that? Find usages. Oh, so it's no usages found. It's just not reporting that it's used. Okay. So just to, let's run this. So just to double check, so this says this assert is never used, so that's good. I'm just going to change this. I'll call it assert 5. That will say there, make assert, rename file. So if I run the test now, if anything was using that, just in case the test would fail. All right, so that might be an easier way of making sure that I'm not mixing it. I could call this assert 5. I could call that assert J as an AssertJ abstraction if I wanted to. But then I might have to do more code changes. And because it's a branch by abstraction, I'm trying to avoid that. But I've convinced myself that I am now migrated to JUnit 5 for the execution and AssertJ for the actual assertions. And again, what I could do is I could come through here, I could do refactor to inline, and then my code base would be using AssertJ as the assertions. And that's a step-by-step approach that cuts down on the amount of copy and pasting and amending that I have to do. Basically, I'm using the JUnit 5 migration with its So I deleted the code. Okay, so the JUnit 5 with its vintage test engine to start with. Putting in the JUnit 5 vintage, there it is, vintage, to give me the JUnit 4 backwards compatibility. Coming out JUnit 4, put in JUnit vintage. Then I fix whatever high priority issues I've got. Then I concentrate on migrating the assertions. And I have now migrated using a branch by abstraction approach to AssertJ. Initially I did it with the inbuilt assertions. I can see how they work. I can determine whether I like that or not. I think I prefer the AssertJ, and I've got the choice now. If I want to, I can get rid of this assert abstraction completely and move to AssertJ by doing inline. So there's a bunch of steps there. If you didn't quite get what was happening, go back through the video, but the steps were pretty simple there. And the key part was creating this class, the branch by abstraction, which allowed me to keep my code when the tests the same. So I've branched by, I've created an abstraction, and then delegate off to the thing that I'm migrating to. And that's allowed me to switch between things and keep the same code that I was using in JUnit 4. Then if I do want to change, I use the inline refactoring to move the code that's in these methods into the actual test classes. And I haven't seen that approach documented in blogs, but that was the one that occurred to me that would cut down on the work. So I'll probably be using this approach when I start migrating my other projects to JUnit 5. And I probably will eventually end up using AssertJ, but this gives me the current flexibility to switch between them. So I'm going to rename this back, rename file, and I'll check that in so you can see it online on the GitHub if you want to explore this migration approach in detail. All right, thanks for watching. Hope that helps.